Thank you. I call this meeting to order at 9. Now for item 2, adoption of the special meeting agenda as presented, please. Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we accept the agenda for the special council meeting for Wednesday, November 30th, 2022 at 9 a.m.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Very good. CAO Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. So in your agenda package today is your second look at the operating budget and your first look at capital. The change in the operating budget compared to our October 31st meeting is that council is presented with two options based on discussions from that time and some internal adjustments. My opinion of the operating budget is that it's being driven higher largely by inflationary pressures, as you'll see in the cover page to your agenda package, that administration is proposing a net decrease to salary funded positions. We are proposing service level reductions to such areas as the OAC, parks maintenance, summer staff reductions, and our solid waste pickup program. Whereas the proposed increases on the project papers, I would argue, are built around capacity building in needed areas such as fire and finance, increased infrastructure investment, and a mantra of better preparing the town for growth and technological improvement built in there related to that. The capital budget is significantly tilted towards infrastructure investments in the core infrastructure, water and sewer, roads and sidewalks, and facilities. I won't preempt the capital budget further, as this is council's first time to discuss it, and I'm sure there will be a robust discussion around that. So with that, I believe I'll turn it over to Director Lindeman, and we can start with the operating budget.
Thank you. So as CEO mentioned, included in your agenda packages was the council discussion paper on our operating budget. In my mind, we have 3 questions that need to be answered today in regards to operating. First is the percent tax increase that council would like to see, the COLA percentage to be given to employees, and the projects that we have included under both of those options. So first, I would like to quickly run through the budget highlights. CAO already alluded to the staffing complement changes, so I won't go too much into that. Next, we had the utility rate changes. So as can be seen here, the average household using 10 cubic meters of water would see an increase of $2.40. This was passed on Monday in the rates bylaw. Next, again, as CAO alluded to, is the service level reductions that have been included in here. And then moving on, we go right into our option 1 for the operating budget, which was a 3% tax increase. Included in the agenda is the projects that are included in that. This would still require an $82,000 pull from our tax stabilization reserve. And I think I will just leave it there and let council discuss where they would like to see that go.
Okay, Director Lindeman has preempted us on where she would like us to head, so I will open the floor at any time for the discussion to begin. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have a quick question, and that is with regards to the COLA, so at 4%, is that, sorry? Okay, sorry. Is that sort of a range that we're seeing in other communities? And how would that impact, when we do our market analysis? I know that that's going to be done, and I believe that's in 2023. Is it not, CAO Williams? It is. So I'm just wondering whether or not we're going to see a big increase due to the market analysis as well, and whether or not should we boost up COLA now and save ourselves a little bit on the market analysis if that goes sky high too. I'm just kind of want to see what the discussion is with regards to that.
So with the first question around comparables for COLA, it's largely in progress right now. I've heard few municipalities that have been approved. 3.5 was, I think, the recent one I've heard. 5.9 was the high end I've heard. So I think a 4 is in that average. Regarding the market review, the issue with either waiting or not waiting is the uncertainty that we're pretty sure that given the COLA and STEP freezes over COVID, that we are behind that 50th percentile. We're just not sure to what level. And I certainly get your logic that it's a lot more comfortable to adjust now, but I think at 4%, which may be at par or in line with the average COLA increase we'll see once all our comparables are in, we'll be closer. So it's really council's discretion at this point around whether we should guess now or wait till we see the data and reevaluate then.
Deputy Mayor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to CEO Williams. So speaking of then the market surveys or analysis that we're going to do for our salaries and our steps and such, exactly would that be a retroactive as of January 1st, 2023, or would it not take effect till January of 2024? Which budget year would it affect? Or is it?
Right, and then we don't have a policy with the market adjustment nor 50th percentile. So when that comes in, probably late February, early March, it's totally council's discretion whether to implement it immediately or look to a January 1, 2024 implementation. So I'm not sure what has been done in the past, but we have no policy in place to guide that.
Supplemental?
Yes, and so then with the market analysis, and of course maybe you can't answer this question for me, this would be something that would affect all of staff, just not certain positions, correct?
All the positions are looked at individually based on a set of comparators, and all positions will be given the same analysis. Not every position will found to be lower or at par, so there will be kind of a piecemeal application of recommendations to council on which grids ought to rise to meet that 50th percentile, where I'm sure there'll be some grids that are probably already at least at or a bit higher, just based on seniority, higher or individual circumstances, what have you.
Rian, Deputy.
Thank you for that. And so therefore, would the part of the analysis, the market study be done, would it determine if we need to increase some of those steps? Would that be part of that process then when you say they're all going to be looked on an individual basis?
Yeah, exactly. So looking at the previous market analysis from 2019, it's very detailed. It does break out individual roles and compares those grids as best it can to the comparable municipalities. So how I see it being presented to council is based on the grid approach. For example, administration grid, we have 6 different positions or 7 different positions. I can't recall which one, but we will present council with what our current low to max grid is and what the market analysis came back as our 50th percentile comparator. And then that would be on council to decide how and when and if we get to that 50th percentile for each grid. So.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to CEO Williams. So is it possible then on a market analysis that you would have some positions that didn't increase and other positions that would, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So then with COLA though, would every staff member receive that increase?
For 2023, yes. I think as we build out our performance evaluation and HR programs, COLA is sometimes withheld or decreased based on performance, but for now there's no concerns around that, nor do we have the mechanisms in place to do that. So right now, it is a straight X% across the board for all staff.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a couple comments and maybe a question or two. One is to answer the question directly around COLA. I don't support COLA any more than 4%. I might convince myself to, or like to convince others to maybe look at 3.5%. As I said before, I am concerned with our dip into the tax stabilization reserve. I realize that we may be running or have opportunity for a surplus in 2022 and be able to replenish some reserves, but I am concerned drawing down the stabilization reserve by, I think, about 28 or 30%. And so adjusting the COLA slightly downward may buy us some room there. I am all fully supportive of fair compensation and consistent compensation for our staff. We do need to be very cognizant of that and change past culture for the administration as to how and what we've done to treat those salary adjustments. But I also realize that, or would mention that any adjustment is going to be progressive, or potentially, and we shouldn't look at this as trying to recoup and correct the salary all in one effort between COLA and any market analysis or an adjustment. I think going forward, what council needs to do with administration is determine a policy and stick to the policy and not deviate going forward. So I don't think we should be looking and saying we've got to capture as much as we can through COLA. We've got to play this out over perhaps 2 or 3 years. And as far as the tax rate goes, I like a 3% rate driven basically by the assessment increase, I think is what we're saying, the inflation on property values. A question for administration, I am concerned about the gap that's growing between res and non-res. And I'd be interested in their thoughts. Are we jeopardizing our competitiveness? I know the preamble doc stated that we are fairly competitive, tax rate wise. But from a business perspective, from attracting and retaining business, are we concerned that gap, that rate difference is going to hurt us down the road? And do we need to maybe be looking to redistribute tax burden at some point?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We'll go to Councillor Walsh.
I guess I have the alternate view. I think COLA should be about 5%. The tax stabilization rate, it's there for a purpose. To not use it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's there, probably this year, as any year, is better than any time to use that when the inflation rate is probably at a 30-year high. So I have no problem dipping into this tax stabilization. So COLA, it will have a positive impact going forward, even in the review in 2023. It brings the wages up a bit, and it may prevent having to raise them and making that decision next year. But no, I would support a 5% increase in COLA.
Thank you. We have Councillor Cummings, then Deputy Mayor Platts.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, two things I want to mention here about what we've heard. COLA is a cost of living allowance that should be based entirely on the concept of inflationary pressures, that the cost of living increases year to year to year. When we look at the market analysis, that's a separate, completely different thing. When we look at COLA and that the rate that the province sets as what they consider to be the inflationary rate in the province at that moment, that's where we're comparing things to. 4% is significantly lower than that percentage, I think, which is 6.5% right now or something along that line from the province. So when we're looking at that cost of living allowance, that's what we need to identify here is, are we going to say, yep, we are going to match what the province is saying is the increase in cost of living to our staff, or are we not? That's it. Adjusting the market to our comparators is an issue about HR and competitiveness and keeping employment standards. Cost of living is something different. I would recommend probably, like Councillor Walsh, a 5% COLA increase, because we're certainly not keeping up with inflation that way. The other issue I have here is the terminology I think we're using is a little confusing about what this 3% tax increase or comparatively a 5% tax increase is. And that's an increase in our overall tax revenue, not an increase in our tax rates. If you look at the two graphs or two charts on residential and non-residential, they are both showing a decrease in our actual mill rate or our tax rate, not an increase in our tax rate. And a message that we need to make sure that the ratepayers know is that the inflationary increases in the value of their properties is what's driving that 3% increase in our overall revenue, not our tax rate increasing, because as administration has clearly said here, in residential, a 3% tax base increase will create a 6.2 decrease in our tax rate. That's very important to know. And I'm sure that when our citizens sit back and go, well, my home is more valuable, therefore I have actually made more money on my books here. I'm not losing any more money, even though I'm paying more money to the municipality to keep the municipality going. That's something we need to understand. I'd encourage everybody to stop maybe using the word tax rate increase, because we're not increasing our tax rate. We're just increasing the tax revenue by decreasing our tax rate. So it's about how much do we want to decrease our tax rate, or how much do we want to not decrease our tax rate, because both options have a decrease in our tax rate. If we scroll down to the second chart, at the 5% overall tax increase, we're actually seeing a decrease of 4.3% on the residential tax rate. So I'm more in favor of the higher tax rate increase, not necessarily dipping into our fund stabilization reserve, because we don't know what's going to happen throughout the year, and that stabilization fund can be that shock absorber we have as we progress through the year and realize, say, the market analysis comes back and we're way off board and we agree to move that way up, back up into the 50%. That may require us to jump into the stabilization fund. So I'd rather keep the stabilization fund available for those shock absorbing events that'll happen throughout the tax year, and go with a higher tax revenue increase with a lower decrease of the tax rate itself.
Yes, Deputy Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and well, that was going to be part of my comments on some of the terminology we're using, but the other thing too, I want to just have clarification, perhaps for our viewing, or for the people who could be viewing or streaming this meeting. By dipping into the tax stabilization reserve, it's not just strictly for the COLA, and I think we need to make that very clear. There's a number of factors that are affecting that, the usage of that fund. And I would lean more myself towards 4.5% or 5% increase to COLA. I think the years that we've had to make catch up and the years we haven't done are much more painful than to keep it more or less steady, as Councillor Cummings has said, to the cost of living rate. So my comments would be we stick to at least a 4 or 5% COLA increase, and that there are many, many different factors that are affecting the use of the rate stabilization fund.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I guess just one comment on COLA. COLA is never usually not intended to mirror what the inflation rate is, and I think our inflation rate, pick a number, day to day, 6.9%. COLA is never intended to mirror exactly what the rate of inflation, what the cost of living is. There's always a multiplier, a factor, or typically involved, unless you're talking perhaps some of the growth employment sectors or the high-tech sector. So just because our inflation rate's running 6.9%, we shouldn't equate COLA in those same terms. There's always a factor involved. And I'd like to go back to my previous comment, and maybe, perhaps I wasn't clear. Ask through yourself to the CAO if he has any comments, questions, or concerns relative to the tax rate and that difference, that delta between our residential tax rate and the non-res tax rate. And I realize we're vastly different than where larger city centers are, but are we possibly going to, at some point in time, look at a redistribution of tax from business to residents? I'm very concerned, conscious of business tax being a tool to attract and retain business.
Noah Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and thanks for the question, Councillor Councillor Wilson. We call it, in the business, residential, non-residential split. In fact, that split is actually legislated to a maximum by municipal affairs at 5-1. Right now, we are obviously 1.3 5 to 1. So we are well under the legislative maximum, but that legislative maximum is largely for rural municipalities, counties, and MDs who tend to rely on the oil and gas revenue to subsidize their agricultural and residential properties. While I can't say it's fair or define what fair would even look like, I will say it is common. In your previous comment about Olds' overall competitiveness in its tax rates, among our immediate competitors, whether they be, even our local Mountain View County competitors, which aren't fair competitors, or sorry, comparators, not competitors, comparators, Didsbury, Carstairs, Bowden, et cetera, they're not this, we can't even compare ourselves to them. It's just a different ballgame. But when I look at Blackfalds or Morinville or Edson or Tabor, Innisfail, Hinton or Whitecourt, our tax rate is the lowest overall. Both residential is the lowest, non-residential is, I believe, based on 2021 stats, Blackfalds has us, Innisfail has us, no, not even that. Morinville has us beat by 0.01 of a mill rate. That doesn't factor in assessments, of course, because maybe old property in Old is more valuable than property in Morinville or Blackfalds. It's hard to say right now. But that's spread right now. So our tax rate as of this day is municipal 6.06 mill rates for residential and 8.2911 for non-residential. That split, I would say, without having the arithmetic done in my head right now, our split is much lower than the average split. Whether you think that's fair or not is really a matter of opinion. Now, some of the rationale I've heard for that split in urban municipalities, again, the oil and gas sector is a different beast because they don't vote nor live in municipalities often, so it's much less of a political football. The rationale is both good and bad, for instance. If you take businesses, business owners versus residential property owners, capital gains tax, corporate tax, they are all lower generally than income tax thresholds. Moreover, you have the, let's call it the write-off system, that business expenses, including property taxes for corporations, are an eligible expense to write off. Property owners of residences don't have that same leeway. So that's some of the rationale that was, I can't say that's good rationale, but historically, over my years in municipal government, that is some of the rationale that was given. Some of the even weaker rationale that businesses in town here pay taxes at a higher rate than residences based on their value, but also they attract residents from outside of Olds into the community, which is a good thing. But however, those residents don't pay for the roads and for the sidewalks and for the infrastructure that our residents also pay for. So perhaps an argument I have heard, right or wrong, is that that higher tax rate supports the pressure on our infrastructure. That does depend on the business. Obviously, a coffee shop is much different than a sundial or a large manufacturing facility. But to end this, probably too long of an explanation than you asked for, there's no solid rationale except to lean on the MGA, which does say thou shalt not exceed a 5-to-1 res to non-res split. And we are infinitely below that. And just the property taxes in general, going back to ECOLA and inflation, right, since 5.9% was presented in October, I think it's now the CPI is at 6.5%. Both our proposed COLA and our proposed tax rates, both options, are below that rate of inflation. And when you see that consumables and fuel and energy and transportation costs and labor costs are all driving factors in CPI, those are also our biggest expenses too. So I believe presenting council with a tax revenue increase, because Councillor Cummings is correct, our tax rate based on today's assessment values will fall significantly. And people will get a higher value should they sell their property or lean on the equity of their property. We are still being responsible, in my opinion, with mitigating the true inflationary pressures that we're facing. So hopefully that answered your question, and I apologize for taking so much time.
Very thorough. Councillor Daly, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, CAO, for the lengthy explanation. No, I agree with our increase of 4% for COLA for retention of employees, as well as to to help our employees out with the inflationary situation that's going on right now. And I also agree with the 5% increase in tax rate for the citizens of Olds, seeing that they are still looking for a level of service that we hear about every day, about keeping up with what we have done in the past. And that all takes money. And with the inflationary rate that's going on right now with the town, I think we need to keep that in mind. And if we, just my own opinion, if we look into the future, I think that we are going to be instrumental, or we're going to be always increasing the taxes coming forward here to keep up with this inflationary rate until we find a plateau. And so, do we do it all at once 2 years from now, or do we look at staging it going forward and having a little bit of a proactive approach to this rather than trying to do a catch-up approach to it? So that's my reasoning behind this. So,
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I'm interested in hearing all of the comments around the table. They've been very good. Makes me kind of think about a couple of things, and I'm going to go a little bit off the wall here because I usually do. I would like to see what, I know we have 3% and 5% on the table. I had mentioned this earlier to Director Lindeman with regards to seeing what a 4% increase would be. And included in that 4%, I'd like to see the inclusion of the IT coordinator and the inclusion of a 5% COLA. And the reason why I'm saying 5% COLA is because of the inflation, and I agree with Councillor Daly. I do think that there's a lot of pressure on, not just from inflation, but because we had not give COLA for last couple of years with regards to, COVID. And I think that there was a lot of pressure then. There's a lot of pressures now, and I think that going forward, while Councillor Cummings says that there's a difference between COLA and the market study, and I agree. However, if we have a higher payment to our staff at the time that we do the market study, we may not see massive increases in that market study. We may be able to burden a little bit of pain now, and rather than a gigantic pain later on. So I'd like to see something at the in between and see what that would come out at. I'm not sure if that's possible or not, but and even if we have to go into the tax stabilization, Councillor Walsh had mentioned that it's there for a reason, and it is. It can sort of give us that little bit of cushion if we have to use a little bit of tax stabilization at the 4%. So that's kind of my off-the-rail thinking.
Yes, thank you. Director Lindeman?
So some quick math here. So another percent in tax increase is $100,000 approximately. Your IT coordinator is about 112,000. Another percent in COLA is about 60,000. So you would be looking about 155 coming from your tax stabilization at a 4% tax increase and a 5% COLA.
Yeah, but you would be making an additional 100,000. So if you have
No,
100,000.
so it's 255,000 is your increase above 3, right? And then take 100 off of that. Because you're already at 80, so you're okay, at 3% tax increase, you're already taking 82 from your tax stabilization. Then you're adding on your IT coordinator, you're adding on a percent in COLA, and then you take away your 100,000 in tax increase.
Okay, thank you.
That's been very good discussion on the table here. Is this the time you would like to do a consensus around the table?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so what we're presented, we've got two separate presentations, one from, go ahead, Director Lindeman.
I think first we would decide on COLA and then tax increase from there. So on the table is 4%. I don't know if,
We do have 4%, as Director Lindeman stated, on the table at this point. Can I have a show of hands for a consensus at 4%? And so that's carried. As far as the consensus there, Director Lindeman, now the second option?
So the second consensus we would need would be on the tax percentage increase, whether that's at 3% and drawing from the tax stabilization reserve, or 5% and adding in the IT coordinator possibly.
Or any further discussion on that before I ask for a consensus? Because we will start then at the 3 and then we'll move to the 5, okay? So let's start with the consensus on the first option of 3%, a yay. And for the 5%, yay. So that, we missed somebody. Okay, so the 4 was the last one? Okay, so that's carried, 5%. Forward. Deputy Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I think maybe I would just like to make one final comment on that. And the reason why I went with the 5% is strictly for the IT coordinator. I believe that's a necessary position that we must add to our staff complement this year due to all of the information we're getting flooded with as far as, cyber security and all of those types of situations. So I really believe that's an important part. And that's the reason why I went with the 5%. Thank you.
I would also add to Deputy Blatz's comment that this is a discussion we've had ongoing since we've been elected. We've had a lot of side desk work taken away from other employees trying to do this position, and I'd concur. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and I was just going to offer the counter opinion comment, and I agree there's been enough discussion on this, but we acknowledge and recognize the inflationary pressures. There are a lot of pressures, drivers out of our control as far as managing the business. At the end of the day, salaries, wages, burden is the one item I think that we can control, and I know there are offsets relative to FTE decreases. Some are simply a reallocation from a direct cost to an indirect cost in the case of the RCMP. But I'm cautious of changing relative to FTE numbers, and I realize there's some offsets because that is the one controllable we do have, so.
Good. We also have a study coming back to us in the future. We'll be able to see where we go from there. CEO Williams, would you like to carry on or have your Director Lindeman?
Okay, thank you. So December 12th, this will come back for final approval, and coming back at that meeting then will be COLA at 4% and a 5% tax increase. Next, we will move then on to capital. So I will quickly just run through the totals at the end here, and then we'll go to each director to present their individual items. If you look at the very bottom, the budget being presented today is approximately $7.7 million. I will quickly first mention, so there are a few items in there that are highlighted in green. These were already approved by council in 2021 when we did the 2022 capital budget, so it was pre-approved. So those items will not be discussed today because they have already been ordered and are in progress for 2023. The red has been removed and replaced with the two items below it. So looking again at the bottom totals, we have 7.7 million, as I mentioned, and those are coming from, so we have 734,000 that will be coming from operating. That is mainly our utility transfers, and then the half ton coming from tax revenue. Under MSI, we have proposed to use 2.7 million, but if you look further down, that will leave us in a shortfall of $200,000. From reserves is 983,000. Other funds, this is other grants other than MSI and county transfers. So as you can see under the command vehicle that was already approved, that will be a portion coming from the county and from the sale of the vehicle. The other 2.2 million is coming from the GICB grant that we were approved for the aquatic center. And then under the CCBF, that is the former federal gas tax fund. We have 900,000 proposed coming from there. So at this point, we'll go back to the top and we'll go through each individual item. The first one under administration is the flagpoles. This is a proposal for 2 new flagpoles here at the admin building, and this is to fly the Métis and treaty flags. I will open that up for any questions.
I would just like to note that since the inception of the Town of Olds working with the Indigenous Day, et cetera, and being so involved with the culture change, it's very important, in my opinion, that we get those 2 flagpoles, so I support them. I'd open the floor. Okay, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I don't normally make a lot of comments about such a small budget item as this, but I am going to not support this motion, and I have a couple of reasons and rationales behind that. Right now, and the reasoning that we're given in this investment information sheet is inclusiveness. But right now we have the most inclusive flag possible flying out in front of our office, and that's the Town of Olds flag. Town of Olds flags represents every single person in the Town of Olds, regardless of their ethnicity, their social groups, their cliques, their whatevers. This modern concept that we need to identify unique groups within our group, separate them from our group, and say, you're special, you're going to have your own flag, seems kind of counterintuitive to inclusiveness. At what stage do we say, your group no longer meets our criteria of significantness, so you don't get your own flag? 30 flags, 35 flags, at what point do we stop? Today's flavor of the day are the Indigenous flags, the LGBTQ plus flags, of which there are 37 according to social media right now. Where do we stop and say your group is not significant enough to have its own flag flying out in front of our town? We have the 3 most inclusive flags. We've got the town's flag, which includes every single person in the Town of Olds, where we shouldn't have to identify each individual group. And again, I know I'm going counter modern culture, where we, for some strange reason, feel we need to identify everybody as their unique group. My fear is, and I'm not going to be the one to say it, at some point later on down the line and say to some group that wants to fly their flag in front of our town office, sorry, you're not significant enough to have your own flag. And that's my fear, that at some point we will get to that point. And I know that today those 3 groups that I identified at the very beginning are the ones who are socially the ones that we're separating and flying their own flags for. Edmonton just did that, and they're permanently now flying their treaty flag in their town chambers. It's a very politically motivated discussion that people are having all over the country to do this. I just don't see the rationale behind it. In any way is it inclusive at all. It is exclusive in my mind, and I won't support it.
I disagree with you 100+%. This is Canada-wide. These recommendations have been put on us through the government for the last, for a very long time. And yes, it has to do with the Indigenous and the history. I respect your comments. However, I do not agree with you. Any further comments? Councillor Walsh and then Deputy Blatz.
Yeah, I would support Councillor Cummings. It's where do you draw the line on how many flagpoles you start putting up? We're not the United Nations in that regard. So I had concerns about that also. And it's flying those flags on special occasions. Great, we can do that for people. But to have it permanently up, I think, again, the Canadian flag, the Alberta flag, and our Town of Olds flags are sufficient.
Thank you. And also, I'd like to remind everyone around this table that Alberta municipalities, we've done a lot of work with them in regards to the Indigenous, and it's, in my opinion, another way that we can support those amongst us. But Deputy Mayor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I was just going to make that comment that we are now welcoming an inclusive community, that we've been recognized that by Alberta municipalities. I don't really know that I want to get into any kind of political debate, which is the right flag or wrong flag to fly outside the office, or when do we draw the line. The Indigenous people were here long before we were, and I think that's part of the recognition for them. I do believe that we have a flag policy in place, and I think whatever that policy says is what we should be adhering to. It has been approved by council, and if this was an operating item only and not a capital item, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We would have just put the flags up and been done with it. So I think it's time to move along to the next item, perhaps.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. My brief comment, and I am, again, sensitive to splintering here or creating, for lack of a better word, factions, but at the end of the day, I just think too, we recognize the land that we were on, and we continually recognize the land that we were on relative to the Indigenous people, the Indigenous nation, and so at the end of the day, I'll support this initiative because, again, we recognize the land that the town of Olds and all the surrounding communities are on, and the roots there, so.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings, and then Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under no circumstances am I saying here that any particular group, the Métis or the Treaty 7 residents, are not contributors to our culture and our community. That's not what I'm saying. And I support the fact that every single person and every single group in the town of Olds has contributed to the town of Olds. My concern is a political concern, and since we're a group of politicians making political decisions, that's where we should be deciding things like this. When we're sitting here, my fear is at some point we're going to have to say, no, your group is not significant enough to have a flag of its own flying in front of our town of Olds. When that decision has to be made, whether it's the LGBTQ community or it's the fathers or sons of this or the group of that, whatever group that is, which one of us is going to sit there and say, sorry, your group is not significant enough to have their own flag? I'm not going to be the person to say that. I'm telling you that right now. Somebody in this room is going to have to say that. And that's the decision we're making here. It's a long-term decision that we have to be prepared to make later on because we're making this decision today. This is the political will that we're seeing around our country today to do this with these two particular groups. But tomorrow we'll have another group, and the day after that we'll have another group. Correct me if I'm mistaken, this council has already turned down flying the rainbow flag of the LGBTQ plus community.
No, we didn't.
We didn't, because I'm pretty sure a letter asking us to do that came around, and we don't have a fourth flagpole with their flag flying. So, no, I'll have to do my research on that one. I might be incorrect on that one, but I'm pretty sure at some point that has happened. Regardless, we fly those two flags. Those other requests will come in for other groups to fly their flags. That's a guarantee. And one person in this room is going to have to say, sorry, your group isn't significant enough. I want to avoid that answer by saying that everybody is included in our flag for the town of Olds, every single group.
Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to put my support towards this motion, or the installation of the flagpoles. I agree with Deputy Mayor Blatz over here and Councillor Wilson in their statements, in that to show due respect for the first residents of this land and the respect of their Indigenous nations and their contribution to Olds. So I would agree with this motion.
Thank you. I feel, I'm speaking for myself, but we were all there, that working with Alberta municipalities, as we've done since we've only been for the new councillors, but definitely it's been done in the past, that we are involved very deeply with in the inclusive recommendations. But thank you. Before I put this to a close, does anybody else wish to comment? All right, so a consensus, please. Yes? No? Okay, it's consensus, yes. On Director Linderman.
So the next item, as I said, is a item in green, so that one's already been approved. And again, the next one, the 610 command vehicle, already approved. So moving on to the special operations trailer, I'll get Director Andrew to speak to this.
Thank you. So what we're proposing is to the purchase of a 20-foot covered cargo trailer that is utilized as a general catch-all or carry device for a variety of items for the fire department to respond and/or municipal enforcement. In the last couple of years, we've identified that the one thing that we're good at is fire trucks carry a lot of tools and equipment, but it's the general purpose nature that we run short on. And so trying to find an effective solution that isn't buying another fire truck or a device that is very specific in function. We want to keep it very general. Some of the operations that would be included in this would be for response for hazardous material incidents where we have to carry large amounts of bulky absorbent materials, drums, and catch devices to clean up spills and different substances, which we have had a few of those calls in the last year in particular, and especially previous. We also would like to have an area where when we respond to a water incident or ice rescue, where our members have to dress in the special submersion suits, doing that in the back of the fire truck is not conducive to keeping holes out of those very expensive suits, because the steps into the fire truck are expanded metal with spikes for grip, and so a waterproof suit doesn't respond well to that. And we have had a couple of those incidents as well in the last couple of years where if we had a trailer that they could get in the trailer and change there would be ideal, and keeping the suits and the guys protected. And again, the same general purpose of carrying equipment for various apparatus and responses, like if we were to be deployed again to a wildfire incident in another community, we have to carry a large amount of equipment because the guidelines from Alberta Emergency Management now indicate that we have to be self-sufficient. So the chances of firefighters being held up in a hotel are slim. They have to take cots and sleeping bags and camp stoves and things like that. The other piece was that we've been renting out our propane fire training prop that we had purchased previously. And the big thing is finding an adequate trailer or conveyance to transport that to different communities. It has gone down to the municipal district of Kananaskis twice now, and that's something that they would like to continue. And it's just a matter of being able to get it there without hindering operations by taking one of the trailers that they have, and they don't have anything that's in a covered nature, so it's completely open car hauler as opposed to a covered unit. So that's kind of just the general overview of what the intent is. And again, this is a supportive thing, and it is a device that we are lacking in the town as a whole. And of course, we would be open to having this available for all of town operations and use, just because it becomes multi-purpose as opposed to a very specialized fire equipment.
Thank you, Director Andrew. I open the floor to council for questions, if any. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. First of all, first question would be, it says it's coming from reserves. Is that just general reserve or somewhere else, Director Lindholm?
It's coming from the Asset Replacement Rehabilitation Reserve.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, Mayor Dahl, ask a second
Mento
question?
Fisher.
I guess it's just more of a comment. If somebody is renting that piece of equipment that you just talked about, why are we transporting it? Why are they not coming up and getting it and bringing it back?
The piece is that they do come and get it. It's just a matter of, for the safety and security of our very pricey piece of equipment, I would prefer that we have the conveyance that it's attached to, and that's the one piece, is if we can make sure that it's all secured, that we don't lose part of it, then that is the preference.
Okay, so supplemental, Mayor Dahl.
Okay, it's supplemental, fine, and then Councillor Daly.
Thank you. Just to further on that then, Director Andrew, I would hope that we would put in the cost of sending it down and bringing it back, because that would certainly be pricey per kilometer, and also just to cover part of the cost of that unit.
I agree wholeheartedly, and we do try to capture those costs. And the one piece is that we found is that the desire for smaller municipal fire departments to rent our device has been limited with their ability to get it to their location. So we seek very reasonable and fair compensation for the use of the device, but they can't get it there, so then they can't use it. So it's kind of that, yeah, it's the chicken and egg scenario, unfortunately.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Director. Andrew, so $40,000 you're asking for here. Obviously, and I'm going to ask the question, this is all in, completely equipped, what you need, inside accommodations for racking, shelving, whatever you're going to do. This is a hitch for a truck to pull it, all in?
It is, and again, there is some provision in there for what you mentioned for sure, but the big premise is that our intent is to keep this very generic, very basic, just so that we don't create another mobile fire truck, if you will, and then decrease its effectiveness because we've specialized it. So it's very restrained as far as its intended purpose. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. So just a follow-up question along those same lines to Director Andrews. So this would become a standard response vehicle with every call-out. It would be traveling to the scene of the incident, and I'm confused. Does it sit empty and then stocked as needed, when needed, depending on the nature of the call? Or are there a set of core pieces of equipment, so on, that are always going to be there?
Yeah, excellent question. So the intent would be, so this would not respond to every call by any means. It's just when it's required. But the intent is that it would be stored empty, and then we utilize what's called a cache system, so that if we have specific incidents, so if we know we're going to a hazardous materials unit, we would have all of our materials stored in the fire hall ready to go, where it would get loaded into that trailer, then hooked onto the utility truck and taken to scene, just like if it was an ice rescue incident, or the one that was in recent memory that was very particular where it could have been handy was when we did the cattle liner rollover in the spring or late winter, I guess. We were out for over 12 hours on the highway in extreme conditions, and so we needed the capacity to have a staging area for our people that could just at least get out of the wind and carry loose material. We needed, animal handling devices like halters and lead shanks and things like that. And so the whole premise would be is make it very versatile by not dedicating it in one specific area and throwing it in and going. And the other piece is that there are costs to be recovered in the use of this. So if we provide this service, then there is the ability for us to charge for it, and that's through insurance coverage and or response things. So I do see this this money actually returning to us probably over a 10-year period, to be conservative, but it could even come faster if there was a major incident, for sure.
Is there no further questions? We'll call for consensus on this item. Yay? Nay? That's carried. Thank you.
All right, the next item again is Director Andrew with the AFRAX radios.
Okay, so with the AFRAC radio request is that in 2022, there's been progress made through communications of the Alberta Solicitor General and the RCMP to allow community peace officers the ability to have radio communication with RCMP officers. And so this is something that disappeared when everybody in the province went to the AFRAC system, because in the legacy UHF or VHF radio system, it used to be allowed that peace officers and fire department personnel could have access to the RCMP channels and allow communication. The AFRAC system came in place, and because of the encryption and the security features put in place by the RCMP, then that ability was removed. And so because of officer safety concerns and lack of efficiencies, there's been strong lobbying from the Solicitor General branch in particular on behalf of the peace officers to allow this, and so now the RCMP have granted that ability. And so going forward, we can have the RCMP radio channels programmed into our peace officers so that they can talk to each other rapidly. Unfortunately, the reason why this cost is so much is that the encryption and security features of the radios are excessive. And so you can see that the cost of $45,000 is for 3 radios, which those costs of this digital technology have absolutely skyrocketed in the last couple of years. And so, yes, it is excessive, and it's a hard one to swallow, but the reality is that I bring it to you because it is a very strong officer safety consideration, is that our peace officers are out and about in the community conducting traffic stops and other things. And if they were to get into trouble, then they have to go through a process of trying to communicate with the RCMP through their call answer service and or calling 911 themselves, when they could actually push a button and say that they need help or where they're at. And so that's the big piece. And the reality is that our peace officers are vulnerable, in my opinion, because they aren't equipped with the same tools that the RCMP are, being, as far as being armed and trained and have that ability. And again, I'm not here to advocate for other pieces. I just say that communication is critical. And there's some things there that go with this that create more operational challenge. And a few weeks ago, there was an incident where there was a joint operation with the RCMP, the fire department, and municipal enforcement for a community response of a particularly high-risk nature. And the one thing that came out of that is that our communications were very limited, that we were having to use cell phones trying to text message and talk to each other in a situation where seconds could be critical. So it is a very high priority for our safety and the operation of our department.
Just a question, will this affect the future if, in fact, there is a download on us of police versus RCMP? Will it be interchangeable, or is there a possibility you can answer that?
The good news is that these radios will have an effective lifespan of, I don't know, until they fail. And I would like to think we would have 10 years of service out of them without hesitation. The big thing is with the technology now with AFRAX and the encryption that these radios would actually contain, these radios essentially are exactly the same as what the RCMP use. So at the end of the day, it's a municipal asset, and if there was a magic wand that was waved that tomorrow we have a provincial police force or municipal or whatever, these would become an asset that would be usable. So there's certainly no risk there that they become disposable.
Hey, it sounds like safety for me. If there's no further questions, I'd ask for a consensus. Yay? Okay, that's carried. I'm going to say carried. Thank you. Go on, Director Lindemann.
So the next item here is the line painter, so I'll ask Director Greco to speak to that.
Thank you, Director Lindemann. So this initiative is that we have before us is for a motorized line painter. So currently we utilize a walk-behind 5-gallon sprayer. The sprayer itself is very inefficient. We can't really paint straight lines. This new painting machine would give us better accuracy with respect to our line painting efforts, especially in the spring. This last spring, we did a considerable amount of the town in preparation for the summer season. It's a very manual process. It takes Public Works a long time to paint these lines. So this line painter will, again, it'll give us better accuracy, better efficiency when painting these lines. The line painter itself is applicable to both concrete and asphalt. And again, it's just going to give us that streamlined painting and accuracy with respect to having straight lines. So.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Director Greco. Could you tell me, can we rent one of these instead of buying one?
Yeah, we obviously could rent one. The thing with the line painter is having access to the unit, bringing in the paint. It it is handy to have in the shop, ready with the paint, having access to that. Some of these assets are very, very difficult to find within the town of Olds. We're talking about going out to Red Deer and Calgary when and if we have to rent those units. General overall maintenance in the unit is better to have on hand and access. We have a limited window of opportunity to paint when that season does come around, and so not having access to that would be a potential risk. So.
Yes, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Grayco, along those same lines. So the utilization of this motorized painter, basically it would be going nonstop from spring break up to the first snow in July, I assume, and where are we at right now using our hand painting or our current methodology? At the end of the summer, the seasonal activity, are we left with many unpainted lines in the town, unfinished business, so to speak? And again, will this motorized machine basically allow us to finish the year fully caught up, every line painted?
Well, to answer your question, line painting is very much a seasonal issue. We can't paint in the rain, and obviously as it gets closer to winter, we're doing other activities. We will certainly be able to paint more lines in the time frame that we're given, especially given, the short weather that we have to work within and paint within. So certainly we'll be able to do more lines, and the important thing is the quality of the lines in itself. So it's very much a manual process, the way we do it right now. This would streamline the process and give us greater accuracy within the town.
Any further questions? Seeing, a supplemental to your comment?
By all means.
Thank you.
Very definitely. So along those lines, you talk about the efficiencies, and thank you for your response. So the efficiencies. So are those efficiencies substantial enough to reflect budget reduction? Do we go from 2 people per job painting to 1?
No. The requirement for paint, we will consistently have to paint when the weather is cooperative. And so the next year, there will still be lines to paint. We will always have to have the same amount of resources painting. So generally, it takes 2 people. Sometimes it takes a person to guide the unit, make sure that we have the materials and the paint ready and everything, and then we utilize the line painter. So I don't foresee that it's going to reduce the amount of resources that's required to do our painting within the town.
Well, you could get it within 6 months for the summer. Deputy Blatz?
Thank you, through you to Director Greco. So, but what you're saying then is that you're probably going to get more painting done with this machine as per, or compared to doing it manually. So overall, you're not going to be carrying forward what didn't get done this summer into next summer. You should be able to complete most of, hopefully, weather permitting, all of the jobs you're required to do.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that it's not going to reduce the amount of resources required to do the paint. We would get most likely more linear feet painted in the same amount of time frame. So that there would be some efficiencies there. I just want to emphasize that it's not a reduction in the amount of staff that would be required to do that same work.
Over there.
I look forward to that KPI metric. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, then I would ask at this time for consensus. Yay? Nay? That's yes.
Continuing in operations, we have the paving at the Operations Center, and this is for Phase 1.
Okay, this initiative that's put before us, when the Operations Center was constructed and built, there were no provisions for asphalt paving within the operation center. This initiative will be the first phase of a phased approach in paving the initial parking lot area up to the security gate. The second phase, which would come at a later time, would be 185,000. Phase 3 would be 330,000, and phase 4 would be 170. So again, right now, the lot as it stands right now, it's very difficult to maintain in terms of snow removal. The other issue that you have is slips and trips hazards with respect to there being asphalt material. It's not exactly accommodating when it comes to people with disabilities and whatnot. So phase 1 essentially would be paving the entire front lot up to the security gate in a phased approach for the operation center.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none at this time, I would then ask for consensus. Yay? Nay? That's yes.
And next we have the snow management system again at the Operations Center.
Again, this initiative before us today is a request for $35,000. Currently, the operation center, it has no snow mitigation system on the roof. So what happens in the inclement weather through ice and snow buildup, we have 8 separate man doors and 5 separate overhead doors where the snow and ice falls down throughout the winter months. This creates a safety concern for our staff and our contractors. The snow management system, what it is it's an engineered railing system. They have these systems in places like Banff, and what it does is it has a retention system so that the snow and ice doesn't fall within these man doors and overhead doors. The system will basically enhance the safety for our staff and our contractors that are coming in and out of the operation center. I will open it up for questions.
Thank you. I open the floor. Councillor Daly?
Is this an item, oh, sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Through to Director Greco. Is this an item that was a deficiency on the building of the Operations Center?
No, it was not listed as a deficiency. It is, whenever you have a new building or a new asset within the town, throughout the operation of it, when you implement any new building or asset like that, you find issues and concern when you implement the actual operation. So it was something that was not included in the scope of the project at the on the original build.
Just comment.
Go ahead, Councillor
Well,
Daly.
it's just interesting that this was not caught on the inspection of the construction of the roof of the building, because I've heard of people not getting occupation permits when these aren't installed. So I'm just really interesting that this wasn't done when the roof was installed on the building. So thank you for your clarification.
A good point, very good point. Any further comments? Seeing none, then I would ask then for consensus. Yay? That's a yes, thank you. Just for information purpose, we'll have a bio break at 10:30 a.m. Thank you.
So moving on, we will move on to our municipal improvement program. So as you can see, previously approved was just the program in general. We are taking that out and now specifying the 2 areas that we would like to do in 2023, and I will let Director Greco speak to them.
Thank you, Director Linderman. So this initiative before us is a continuation of our 52nd Street. So again, many of us are aware that we completed phase 1 of 52nd this year. Again, we have inflow and infiltration issues within the community. We have a SANI relining program that helps us deal with maintaining infrastructure to help us with those inflow problems. The real issue is that we have to stay current with the actual replacement of our infrastructure. This phase of the project would be continuing on 52nd from 51st Ave to 53rd, including in front of the Sportsplex. We would have a full replacement of the sewer and water services right to the property line, including the catch basins, the leads, sidewalk, curb and gutter, and road surface. A lot of the design costs for these projects are, we've seen significant increases in the size of this. And just to speak a little bit about what Sheena had just mentioned is we have the next project here, which if we have enough to do that project too, I just want to comment that we're seeing a sizable shrinkage in the amount of services that we can do with respect to these replacements. And again, so this initiative will cover phase 2 of 52nd Street. I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you for that information. I'm looking around the table. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we've had a couple of conversations around the table about replacing the old copper lines from the shutoff valves into the properties as a leak remediation process. While we have the street ripped open, and we are going to those valves already, because that's in the project description you have here, that you're taking the water line to the valve. Is there any consideration of incorporating that other project and replacing what remains of copper piping to the house while we have the road open? It seems to be it would be cheaper and more efficient to pull those copper lines out and replace them with the municipal pipe that we are using today at the same time, rather than later on in a date dig more holes into people's properties and pull those lines out. I know this isn't an area that's been targeted, that's more in Deer Meadow. Do we even know if this area has copper piping? It's just as old, if not older, than the Deer Meadow area. And that's the question. Are we considering merging the two projects together at the same time to reduce costs?
Did you want to answer that prior to, and then Deputy Blatz?
Yeah, I'll explain. So this project here, so we had a report, the 2017 Al Turner report had identified areas that had these, what I call mixed connections, including copper connections where we had anodic and cathodic reactions. So that more or less dealt with the water. So we had some areas that identified that were areas of concern. So we've identified those areas. Some of the recommendations in the Al Turner report we have completed. Some of the recommendations we have not completed. We have also standardized all of our connections to what they call a Blue Brute, which is an engineering guideline that would call for PVC piping to be standardized. So when we're doing these projects, all of those guidelines are being met with essentially the latest and greatest PVC connections. So when we are doing 52nd, we are basically taking care of the latest and greatest connections with those PVC connections. So we are taking care of that. In this particular area, it's not required. It's basically the sewer system is old clay, asbestos. That's the stuff that we're replacing and upgrading. So we're not having water loss areas within this area that are problematic per se.
Thank you. Deputy Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I was just going to make a comment in regards to the alternative report because I brought it with me, but Director Greco already covered it, so thank you.
All right, if there's no further information sharing at this, then I'll call for consensus or ask for consensus. Yay? Yeah, that's a yes, thank you.
And continue on with, so the next initiative is the replacement of 65th Ave asphalt removal and base repair and repave. If the project costs for 52nd are basically if we can come under that amount, we're hoping to complete the 65th Ave project. This project value is $550,000. It would include the removal, base repair, and repaving of 65th. Again, 65th is a major corridor. Arterial connection to the fire hall, our emergency services. We would be looking at upgrading that and ensuring traffic safety. We're seeing lots of damage to the road. Further deterioration of the road would actually increase our cost down the road when we do have to entirely replace the road. So we have that project in here. We're hoping that the other costs on the projects are come in under that so that we can fit this project in as well. I'll open it up for any questions.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a quick question for Director Greco. Can you just comment, not only in this situation, but the one before it, and even things like the line painter? How do we go about getting these cost estimates? Like, we're seeing $550,000 in this particular case. You referenced there are pressure or pinch points happening. 20 minutes ago, we all talked about 6.9% inflation. I guess I'm just wondering, this $550,000 in this case, what's your confidence around that? I realize that sometimes until you actually, well, not sometimes, until you actually start doing the work and you encounter surprises. But can you maybe just talk very briefly how we arrive at 550,000, and what your confidence is of that value?
Those values have been rising, much to my discussion and your discussion. The reason why we put two projects in, so we use a consulting engineer to gather these costs. We put out a tender package. Once those costs come back, we do what we call a preliminary estimate for those jobs, and our CET will work with the consulting engineer at gathering those costs, and that's where we're seeing a lot of these sizable increase in jobs. Even some of the smaller basic jobs, like patching and paving, bringing in those jobs, we're seeing our dollars not being able to be stretched as far as they were as a result of inflationary pressures. We're also seeing within the town of Olds, it is difficult to get contractors to come out to Olds. We even see some of the larger organizations not wanting to bid on some of the smaller jobs. So Olds might be a little bit unique in where we're situated. If you get some of the larger contractors, they want the big jobs. So when it comes to getting contractors for some of the smaller jobs, it can be very difficult. And that kind of leads into a further discussion is how do we get contractors to come into Olds, even for the smaller jobs? So we in operations are evaluating that, and we'll be putting a plan together to try to get more contractors to bid on jobs. Obviously, we can't make people put out for RFPs. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, very good, very good answer. Looking around the room, and if you have no further comments, Director Geico? All right, then I will ask for a consensus. Yay? That's a yes, thank you.
So next, we move on to our water and wastewater areas. First one is our water loss and I&I prevention program.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up another document just here. Just bear with me. So this initiative handles both our water and our wastewater repair program. So we've been talking a lot lately about some of the concerns with our infrastructure within the community. Again, our water loss hovers at anywhere from 27 to 30%. With respect to water loss, our wastewater infiltration, we're hovering at around 40%. Director Lindeman, correct me if I'm wrong. These combined areas of focus in our infrastructure account for about 1.5 million per year. That's what we estimate. This initiative, so we have put together basically a phased approach to dealing with our water loss and our wastewater repair program. So included in this initiative would be phase one. So to talk a little bit about phase one, again, I commented on the Al Turner report. In 2017, we sat down and looked at what the community did when the report came out. Some of those recommendations were executed by town staff over the last 5 years. Some of those items were not. Where we're focusing on in phase one are items that we feel are going to have the most impact at reducing our water loss and taking care of our infiltration problems. Included in that phase one approach is completing 2,800 meters of sewer relining. That's an approximate cost of $300,000. Complete the lining of 15 manholes. That's an approximate cost of $100,000. Purchasing of smart covers to monitor our sewer infiltration. That's an approximate cost of $43,000. Again, the smart covers are designed to monitor our infiltration within the community. These smart covers will help us gather data of where our problem issues are within the community. Our intent is to move these manhole covers around the community and identify areas of concern, but also to identify areas that we don't have to worry about. So if we are investing dollars and dollars are being stretched, we want to make sure that those are invested in the right areas. These covers are going to give us the data to make that happen. The last and final item within phase one is the installation of vault meters for some of our larger customers within the community. That will handle the water loss issues. And again, there's a bunch of other, I would call it, not intangible things, but a number of procedures within the town that we would adopt. Further analysis of where water loss might be located. The addition of using sound-based technology to understand where some of those water loss issues are. And so this initiative calls for a total of $643,000. But again, we have a $1.5 million problem. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you for sharing that. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dole, through you to Director Grieco. Could you tell me now the smart manhole covers? Are you looking at placing them like for a year to study and then move them somewhere else, or does it take longer to create that data that you're looking for?
What we'll do with the covers, so we will basically have the data to overlay precipitation data. So when we get high events of precipitation, we'll be able to analyze different areas of the community where we think that there may be infiltration problems. So yes, it will take some time to gather this data. It's important to note that when the covers are out during rain events, it's also important to establish the baseline. So even getting them out in January and February to start gathering our baseline, where there shouldn't be infiltration in January and February, we can start establishing our baseline. It will take about a year to gather this data, and that's why in phases 2 and 3, we'll have the data to know where our problem areas are.
Just supplement them.
Go ahead, Councillor Ryan.
So the idea would be collect the data and then address the problem, then move them to another location and go around the town eventually. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, we do know of areas through the Al Turner report that weren't completed with respect to some of those mixed connections. There's areas in the community that we know that are problems with respect to water loss. So phase 2 would have a lot of those items in there that we have the knowledge, internal knowledge, to know where those areas are, and those are the areas we can focus on, and we're going to get the best bang for our investment.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I have a brief comment or two. One is, I love this idea, this plan. As most people know, I've been pretty passionate about water and water loss, and I think if we go through this in the 3-year plan, I'll be able to retire a happy man. You talked, though, about the smart manhole covers or whatever, and I'm just wondering, over the 3 phases of this plan, what does it also look like around sound, vibration detection, individual water lines, that sort of thing? Is that future, or is that part of manholes and smart manholes in the current phase 1? Thank you.
Yeah, that's obviously the existing thing that operations would do procedure-wise, at identifying those areas where there is issues. We have consistently been doing that, and we think we can find those areas as we continue those processes. The important thing is that we need to start this plan immediately, and we need to move forward. This investment, I have full faith that this investment is going to help reduce our water loss and our infiltration problems.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've done a lot of study on this, and thank you for sharing several times with us. If there's no more questions at this time, I'll call for consensus. Yay? That's a yes. At this time, I'd like to call for a 10-minute recess, and we'll reconvene back in 10 minutes.
At WestJet, we're excited about our Black Friday sale, and you will be too, for everything. The flight, the fun, the savings, the sun, the forgetting your swimsuit. Okay, not that last one. Book your getaway today at WestJet.com or call your travel agent.
Hey Spotifyers, click or tap the banner to listen to Discover Weekly, your weekly mixtape of fresh music. Enjoy new music and deep cuts picked for you. Updated every Monday. Brought to you by Paramount Plus, a mountain of entertainment.
Did you know you can find your favorite artists' concerts on Spotify? Tap the button to see a list of upcoming, personalized live and virtual events just for you.
Okay, the next initiative is a robotic rover sewer camera. This amount is an initiative worth $150,000. It is an initiative for a camera system and software system that would update our existing camera. Our existing cameras from 2012, so it's already over 10 years old. We have issues with this older technology with specific attention to the software. We also have hardware concerns with the camera. We're consistently having to replace leaking seals on the camera. Parts availability has become troublesome. And so this initiative is a call for a new updated camera. It's going to give us greater functionality, including elevated lenses that allow for better access and analysis of our town main lines. The camera also has a stronger focus and ability to focus on areas of concern within these main lines. The newer robotic cameras are also a lot more powerful. We have had a couple of examples where we've almost lost our camera and not been able to get it out of our main line. So we have been able to retrieve it. We haven't lost it entirely. But the newer systems are extremely more powerful, giving us that ability to make sure we are getting a good analysis of our main lines. The other upgrade within this initiative is some modifications to our existing trailer camera, our trailer that houses the camera. So we'd have to make some upgrades to that trailer to accommodate the new camera. Again, I will open it up for any questions.
I had the opportunity to see that camera at RMA convention, and the gentleman said he actually sold us our previous one. Is that, and he came to visit you. Is this the same company we're buying that off?
Well, there's a couple different, the cameras are actually quite unique. There's not a lot of these camera manufacturers. There's only about 2 of them, so we will put it out for bid, if you will, and yeah.
They truly are amazing. Any further questions, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Excuse me, just a question or two. Just wondering, on the usage of the camera, is it more part of repair and maintenance and known problems and reacting to known problems, or is it going to be used in a proactive manner, preventative-wise? Do we use it daily? Do we use it, as I said, more as needed, when needed, in terms of repair and maintenance? Can you give me an idea? Thanks.
Sorry. Absolutely. So both both uses are both proactive and reactive. If we have problem areas, we know some of the areas that are already problems, but there are areas within the community that might pose an area. So if we're talking about areas that consist of restaurants and whatnot, those are areas that we kind of know about, and we might be able to go in and have a look at where the issue is. And again, as part of our proactive utility personnel reviewing those lines, yes, absolutely. Especially in some of the older areas that have the clay and asbestos lines. Finding out those areas gives us greater capability to say, okay, we can go from this area in the sewer relining, and we can identify and analyze the camera footage, and to say, like, we don't need to replace this line. Let's have a further look at this line, and maybe we just need to do sewer relining. So again, that it would be more of a proactive approach. But certainly having that footage to understand where we do sewer lining as opposed to full-on replacement will give us, this camera will give us those greater capabilities.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that information. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Director Greco. So just for my own curiosity, do we have people trained for this newer camera? And do they provide the training when you purchase, or how does that work?
Yeah, excellent question. Right now, our personnel are trained on the existing camera and on the software. With the new camera comes the new software. There are no software upgrades required. All of the training and use of the camera is provided with the purchase. So.
Thank you very much. All right, no further questions around the table, so I would ask for consensus. Yay? That is a yes. Councillor Daly has departed, so we've got everyone around the table. Thank you.
So next we will move on to the Aquatic Center, and I will get Director Wagstaff to speak to these 4 items.
The first one is some priority updates with regards to the Aquatic Center. So we need to look at retrofitting the facility with a chemical delivery system. This would include the purchase and installation of large storage tanks that would be at the back around the ramp, which will allow for the chemical to be offloaded by the delivery truck or driver by using hoses. What we have encountered is in that particular instance, we, with the changing of some protocols that the delivery, different delivery groups, all of them are, is that they will unload at the top of the ramp. They will not go down the ramp with the chemicals. That requires us to bring over operations and coordinate an operator to come over with a bobcat or a lift to help us lift the pallets off the truck and take them down inside. Secondly, even after that happens, this new system would mitigate a lot of the handling of the chemicals by our staff in barrels. They come in large barrels, which are difficult to maneuver. So a number of our staff do have some difficulty in moving those barrels. So this is a safety, health and safety. It's been noted in our health and safety inspections that this would be an improved process at a number of stages with handling of that chemical. Also with regards to some of the changes in retiling of the change rooms. Currently, the tiles in the shower rooms are 20 years old. We are starting to have some chipping and tiles coming off. This would be a preventative maintenance. They're also becoming difficult to clean. So it's both a preventative maintenance as well as an aesthetics to be able to improve the showers. Sump pump, this is one of the recommendations we have from our facilities technician.
They spend a great deal of time and effort in replacing and fixing the sump pump. It's been 20 years, but it was not, not properly or not adequately, installed originally on rails. And this is something that would reduce the amount of maintenance that needs to occur on that sump pump because it rattles around while it goes off. It also will help on the connections being properly done there. So with that, in total, it's $72,500.
All right, thank you for that information. And does council have any questions? Seeing none, we've got the details you've shared, and I would ask then for consensus. Yay? That's a yes.
Security cameras at the Aquatic Center is next. It's one of our facilities that does not have any. We would like to explore, as we have been for some time, an alternative system to what we currently have in our other facilities. We have currently three companies that are providing us an assessment of all of our facilities, but we'd like to start, because there would be 6 cameras, up to 6, depending upon where the quotes end up settling in. 1 interior camera, which would be located in the lobby and reception area, and up to 5 exterior cameras. So we had 3 critical areas, and then we had 2 optional areas, and depending upon the pricing, where that would settle in at, to cover the exterior parking lot as well as the exterior entrances, exits of the building. And that way we would get an understanding as to how another camera system might be more efficient and more cost effective than our current system. Again, it's a smaller one of our facilities, and it would be one we could pilot and test on how this alternative system would work and integrate with our current system.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Wagstaff? Seeing none, then I would ask, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Cummings?
Your Worship, just a quick clarification here. So is the intention then to install this system at the pool, and then this system can then expand to cover and replace the existing systems we have elsewhere, as we've talked in the past about having a single system operating our surveillance throughout the town? Is that the goal of this? Is this company that we're dealing with capable of going that far?
It's plural companies, and yes, so far they've all been scalable. That was one of the first parts to it, that it would be scalable. And it also looks like it also might be integratable to some of our current infrastructure we have with our current system. So that's what we want to test to make sure that it is what they say it can be.
Question, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a quick question through you to Director Wagstaff. And I don't want to divert the discussion here from its obvious intent, but you talk about theft. Can you comment? I'm just curious. Is this theft in various common areas within the pool? Obviously, you wouldn't be able to put cameras in the locker room, I wouldn't think. But can you just a brief comment on the...
I can briefly comment on the theft component. So there has been, on occasion, there's been theft out of the locker rooms, but there's also been some theft and questionable activity in the outside of the pool as well. So that's something that cameras can help us, both as a deterrent as well as being able to help identify when we do call in the RCMP. Now, overall, on the process of how that works, you're correct. That's why we only have 1 in the interior. What these cameras are, the strategy that we employ in our other facilities, you put them in high traffic areas, the areas where people have to congregate to get in and out of the building. So you may not capture 100%, and in fact, we cannot capture 100% of the building, but then you can have an opportunity to capture people that have come in and out of your building.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? All right, seeing none, then I would ask for consensus. Yay? That's a yes, thank you.
Whibbit, and I know there's some questions. What is a Whibbit? So Whibbit is a PlayStation, a floating PlayStation is what it is. The Aquatic Center would like to add this to its repertoire of what it offers as a service in the pool. It also has an opportunity for some revenue generation because it can be upsold as a value-added piece to private rentals, birthday parties, and that type of thing when we're doing the rentals within the pool. It also creates an opportunity to add some public swim activities, college swim activities where you have this floating playground within the pool. They are trending, they're becoming quite popular amongst pools, and this is an opportunity for us to add a service to the pool.
Would you be able to share with me if there's a pool in our region that has a Whibbit? Or
Innisfail does, yes.
does anyone have questions at this point? Well, with Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Wilson.
If Innisfil has one, we better get one, because that's just not right. And that's a comment. But another comment is, thanks in the updated capital investment information sheet to have the website listed so we can actually look at and see what a Whibbit is. And I did that, and I thought that was a really cool device, and if I was 20 years younger, I'd be the first person on it, running across it on the pool. It's a really cool thing, and I do see a lot of potential on it being upsold and stuff like that at the pool. One quick question here, I'm not sure if you can answer it or not. Does it come with an air compressor, or do we have to buy or rearrange to have one set up there too? Or is that included in the cost? I'm not too sure how that goes.
I do not know that answer. I would have to get back to you on whether an air compressor is part of the price.
Hopefully we have one somewhere in our operations. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dell. Just a quick question or two for Director Wagstaff. Thanks for the report. I'm a very practical guy. I like a place for everything and everything in its place. Storage of the Whibbit, not an issue, a concern in our current facility, and upcharging, not an issue relative to our rates, bylaw, and everything. So when I book my 65th birthday there, I can, you'll charge me a rate that reflects the use of the Whibbit.
That's correct, and I look forward to seeing you in your Speedo at that 65th birthday. No, storage, that was the main part that they looked at, was where, and it will go in underneath the slide and be stored back in that corner.
I think these are the same ones I see at the lake all the time, are they? Yeah, they're very popular for sure. Any further questions? At this point then, I would ask if we could have a consensus. Yay? And that's a yes for you too, Councillor Cummings. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand. Thank you. And that's a yes. I look forward to that for the children in the community and the adults, the mums and dads.
This last one is a significant upgrade to our pool. Based off of the successful acceptance of the Green and Inclusive Communities Building Grant, the Aquatic Center has been approved, if approved by Council, for funding of upgrades with regards to heating plant, ventilation upgrades, plumbing, the whole back end, the roof replacement, adding solar to the Aquatic Center. We have completed an efficiency and energy audit on this facility and determined that it has meets a lot of criteria to be able to be upgraded. A lot has changed in the 20 years since it was built to be able to make it more of an efficient building for energy use. Updating that envelope would also make it more climate resilient, which will open us up opportunities for other grants in the future. And obviously energy savings, and that's the primary reason for doing something like this, focusing on this rehab. Our pool has not received an upgrade since it was built. This would be its first major extension to the life of that building. It is a building that is obviously some very high energy use, Again, you would think 20 years ago wasn't that long ago, but it's compared to the technologies of today, it's highly inefficient, and its equipment is outdated. So the mechanical and building envelope would have an update based off of a grant application.
When would that grant application take place if we were to receive that? Like, the work starts, sorry. That's the question.
I'm going to refer that to Director of Finance with our grants administrator.
So the grant has been approved. We have been approved for this already. The work would start upon council's approval in 2023.
Thank you for that great information. Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Ryan.
Your worship, so a quick question here. Is this a matching grant? Is that why we have $500,000 on our side and 2.2 on their side, or is that just a shortfall in the grant and the expected work that we have to come up with?
It's an 80-20 grant, so we have to provide 20.
So for our 20% investment, we will receive the 80% to finish the project.
Go ahead, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Director of Wagstaff. So do we know, you mentioned life cycle, do you know how long it will extend the life of the building? And I just want to say, this is wholeheartedly, I'm behind this because certainly a lot has changed, like you say, in 20 years, and going to become more energy efficient is just the way to go. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest utility draw for the town, I would think.
Notwithstanding the exterior, like the walls of the exterior, this essentially brings us up to almost like a new facility. There will be the ongoing inputs that we have to do every 5 to 7 years with regards to tiles in the pool and that kind of thing, which whether you start new or whether you do a revision. But as far as the plant end, this would be like having a new plant. So basically start the clock from zero.
And when we started at zero, it was a saltwater pool. And so we had to retrofit that. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just my brief comment. Yeah, I was going to say this is a good news story, and I'll change that. This is a great news story, and in terms of the GHG implications, the energy efficiency, carbon impact, and net move towards net zero. As you said, it basically gives us almost a brand new building, almost. And so I think as this program or this project proceeds, certainly look for administration to get the word out through various media about the success of this grant and what it's going to do for the pool. Obviously this is a starting point within this forum, but to me there's very much a great news story to be told here. So,
Lindeman?
With federal grants, we are hand-tied as to when we can announce it, so we have not been given the approval yet to officially announce, but we will as soon as it is.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to either Director Wagstaff or Director Linderman. Is there similar grants we can apply to for our arena? We're aware of yet, because if this is the type of grant we can get for the pool, I think we would be remiss not to apply for a similar type of grant for our arena.
So it was through our municipal energy manager that we applied for this grant. We did look at both facilities, and it was the aquatic center that gave us the best energy savings in order to apply, because you had to meet a certain criteria of savings. I believe it was 40% you had to show, and it was found that this was the facility to use for that.
Perfect, thank you for that.
We've asked our questions then. There's no further questions at that point, so I will ask for the consensus. Yay? And congratulations to the staff and everyone that put this together. Thank you, Director Linderman. That's a yes to go.
So next we are moving on to our Sportsplex, and again with Director Wagstaff.
Some priority upgrades that we have identified within the Sportsplex. Lighting, again, and energy efficiency. We have upgraded the lights in there a few years ago. Again, how quickly technology can change, that you can have brighter, cheaper, more energy efficiency. Where we're at right now is we are needing to begin to replace not the LED lights themselves, but the components above the LED light. So we, from our facility technician, we have a recommendation that if we were to change out the lighting in the main arena, we could use those components instead of having to buy new ones for the auxiliary arena. Right now, we're beginning to increasingly need to purchase more and also do the changes. New technology does not require the transformer, and that's the technology that's above the LED light itself that's causing us the issues currently. So those components would be stored and reused instead of having to purchase additional components for the auxiliary, and we'd install up-to-date, more efficient lights within the main. Ammonia detector, this is one, again, that's critical. It's something that we need to install in the vestibule and the adding the horn and the strobe light sensor in the plant room. Outdoor display and strobe needs to have a certain rating, and this is one that we are in need of adding. Panel replacement to replace the Delta Controls devices in the mechanical room. This is preventative. It's also more efficient, not on energy, but just on the efficiency of the data that our operators can receive and can control in the cabinet. Sump pump is another additional one that is at high risk right now if we don't make the repair. We did replace the sump pump in the other area between the curling rink and the auxiliary arena. This is identical sump pump, but it's on the main arena over in the ice bear area of the ice where we dump the snow into the snow dump. So when we took out that one before, that's what triggered this. Because we replaced the sump pump last year in prior to Pinty's, because it had been identified that we needed to make sure that didn't go during Pinty's, because it's over by the plant room over there. And this is one that once we saw when it was pulled out, the condition it was in, we had high concern because the pump that is existing is of the same year, exactly same pump that was put in. So this is a preventative maintenance one.
Okay, do we have questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a quick question through you to Director Wagstaff, just around the ammonia detection. So there's no ammonia detection now in the facility?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It is there, so this is
upgrade.
to enhance that, just to, again, with some of the, incidents that have occurred in arenas, it's becoming, and forgive the pun, but more hypersensitive to ensuring that these are well covered.
Pimentel.
Yes, thank you. And so along those lines, like when we say the sportsplex, I think of the two rinks, but we're covered as far as ammonia detection in the curling side of the facility?
The same sort of detection and sensors, as well as the horns and blue lights, are in place in the curling rink as they are in the arena side of the sportsplex.
We certainly are aware of the preventative measures that are necessary for this from other municipalities that have taught us. Any further questions? I will then call for the consensus. Yay? Very good, that's a yes.
Sound system in the main arena. It is one that has created a great deal of, I'm going to say, consternation with our user groups and the audiences. So this would be to upgrade that sound system. It would benefit all of our users within the complex, and allow some volume control as well. Right now, it's difficult to actually get the sound because it goes up and down, varying on what mics you use, and it requires someone being back underneath in the office communicating with someone either up in the sound booth or down behind the timekeeper's booth at the same time. So we'd like to improve that both on the sound and the ability for the users to adjust without having to call in operators as well while they're doing other things in the arena.
That sounds like a waste of manpower. Councillor Cummings?
Your Worship, so just a clarification here. This is a control issue of the sound. 'Cause I've been to a few games now, and it's incredibly loud. I mean, deafening loud, that you can't hear what's going on because it's just so uncontrollably loud. In my personal experience every time I've been there. So we're not getting more speakers. We're just getting a better control mechanism to control the output of the sound. That's what I'm hearing from you?
It's also speakers, so making it crisp, not blurry. I guess blurry is a visual thing, but blurry sound, muffled sound out of the speakers currently, which does require, in some opinions, it does require then higher volume to get, the music clarity. But so this would be crisper sound, so you can hear it better, as well as a control issue.
That's good. The Grizzly Games will like that too. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And again, just a quick question. Do all user groups on the main ice have the option to have the sound system operating, or are there limitations, restrictions, certain age group or whatever?
All user groups have an option to use the sound. We are right now making a minor fix because there are some wiring issues that we brought someone in the summer, so that it can be controlled, not the sound volume control, that's different, but the actual playing controls can be done from easier, more user-friendly from both locations of the sound booth and behind the timekeeper's booth. If you went in there today, no.
Were you looking for a sound system? Okay, very good. Any more questions around the table? Okay, we have no more questions, then I'll ask for consensus. A yay? That is a yes, thank you. Main floor painting,
I didn't bring that one up, so I'm going to go
Thank
this
you.
one from memory completely. So this is epoxy. It's not painting. It's actually an epoxy application to the floor. It hasn't been done in 7 years. Both, again, preventative maintenance, as well as aesthetics. We'd like to redo the main floor on the main concourse.
Do you notice whether the costs have gone up since the last time you've done them significantly, or could you tell us that?
I'm going to wager yes, because it's been 7 years, but no, I don't know exactly what it cost us 7 years ago. I'd have to look that up.
All right. Any questions? When you say it's preventative, why? Why would it be that would make it preventative?
It's also wear. So the difference between paint and epoxy is that it's actually an added layer to the floor. So you're not wearing on the concrete and starting to get that, what I would call a cow path in the concrete.
That's good to know. Councillor Wilson?
Mayor Dahl, so just, again, I don't want to totally divert the conversation, but so you paint it with the epoxy. We'll obviously take the care to make sure we get some slip-resistant epoxy resin going on there.
Yes.
Okay, very good questions. Nothing further? I'd ask for the consensus, please. Yay? That's a yes, thank you. And that brings us to the end of Sportsplex. Director Lindeman.
So next we will move on to parks, and we'll have Director Greco talk about the Centennial Park washrooms.
Okay, thank you. This initiative is for a new Centennial Park washroom. The total cost of the washroom is estimated at $350,000. That is inclusive of not just a washroom, but also a change room and concession facility, along with a roof extension that would accommodate a picnic area. The bathroom itself would be utilized year-round, so we would have a bathroom at Centennial Park where many of our festivities are located within Centennial. And again, with the splash park, the winter skating rink, and other park activities, we would remove the existing washroom facility, construct a new one, and also a small expansion of the parking area. I will open it up for questions.
So when you say that it is going to be open year-round, what are the hours per day? Like, we're not leaving it open all night long. We're for security?
Yeah, the bathroom would have hours of operation that would shut down. Most likely, it would be shut down from 9 p.m. until the morning hours, but depended on whether or not there were festivities. The other thing, with the washroom, it does come with an impact on our operating budget. To note, it would be approximately $5,000 a year to operate the washroom. But again, it is a facility that would be open year-round and provide opportunity for those amenities.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Director Greco. So you mentioned a concession too. So would this wouldn't have an impact on us? This would be something that would be utilized by, per se, a user group, but not by town staff. So we wouldn't have to increase our staff complement to man said concession or anything else like that, correct?
I might turn that over to Director Wagstaff to answer that.
That is correct. So if you're envisioning what we have out at Rotary Park, this would be a very similar type of setup, at least in the amenities that are there. Maybe not the exact design, but the amenities that are there, where you have a small area where a user group can sign it out and have access. Very much like what we have now with regards to the Cook Shack, but this would be a more modern facility.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. My opinion here is that we're $200,000 of shortfall, and this is one area that we can make it up in one fell swoop. I don't think we need this thing right in the moment. It's something that we can budget for in the future. It's a nice to have, but it's not a really need. We had conversation with regards to putting heaters in that washroom so that it could be used in the wintertime. There was also conversation with regards to winterizing porta potties, to have them in the park so that people who are using the outdoor rink have a place to go. And those are both far less expensive. I'm not in support of this at this point, and I think it's something that we could bring forward for another round, another year.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan and Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two quick questions here. You mentioned, Director Greco, that there's a $5,000 operational cost of this facility. Is that in addition to the current operational budget that's assigned to the facilities that are there now that are going to be replaced, or is that the total estimated cost of running the new facility? And if that is the case, do we know how much we were spending on the old facilities that were there, or are there currently?
I don't have the amount of costs that we're currently spending there. What I do know is that washroom is winterized. So we're not supplying any sort of natural gas or heating requirements at the time. Our estimated costs of the $5,000 include the heating of the facility year-round, consumable charges such as toiletries, janitorial, along with there would be a component where we would have to provide year-round janitorial services. So those costs are coupled in at the estimated 5,000. Option 2 was to put the heaters in. That's why we would see an operational cost increase if we were to upgrade the existing washrooms. And that solution is problematic because the facility is very old. We'd be talking about putting in heaters into a very old building. And so the heating costs on that alone are estimated at roughly $2,000 a year, along with some janitorial as well.
Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Cummings, and then Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Greco, and you started to address my question. When I look at the project justification sheet, you do indicate option 1 is the platinum version of a total rebuild. Option 2 is for $11,000, we could put heaters in the existing facility, which I would say is a temporary, perhaps a year, 2-year solution, not a long-term. But we could do option 2 standalone for $11,000, which you indicated would have a potential heating cost of $2,000 a month. A year. Or option 3, put the pink and blue porta potties out there and go with that for $300 from November to April. Yeah, correct? Those are 3 separate, distinct options.
Yes, and what I would like to do is clarify option 3. We have 6 central locations that we've already winterized, so we've reached out to our porta potty vendor. Those have been winterized as the cost was very reasonable at providing a winterized porta potty. So we do have 6 locations throughout the town that residents will be able to utilize. So we've kind of gone through option 3. Option 2 is not necessarily ideal because, again, you're upgrading the heating system into a very aged building. The building is virtually unusable. Not from a safety perspective, it's just very old. You'd be looking at upgrading a heating system into an extremely aged facility.
Thank you for that. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Blatz, then Councillor Cummings and Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Greco. He pretty much already answered my questions because I believe he mentioned to us earlier, at an earlier meeting, that it would be hard to heat these facilities as they are due to the age of the building already. I was going to point that out, and I also wanted to state that we had porta potties on already that you've already stated would be available throughout the park. So at this time, perhaps maybe it is not something we need to look at a full brand new build, but I do believe coming in the future, it is something we should definitely keep on the radar for future builds.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the concession stand, I'd like to talk about that a little bit here. So I've often thought that with the volume of people that attend the splash park in the summertime, that a small concession stand operating there would be a great benefit to both the people in the community and the town as a revenue generator. Because I'm all about revenue generation. And the idea that we're simply going to allow, because I believe, that, correct me if I'm wrong here, Director Wagstaff, the cook shack, do we charge people for that? And if that's the case, is the idea here that we can make the concession stand available for rental? Or is it just for, hey, thank you, you want to use this facility, there you go ahead and use it at no cost to the facilities? So I see this more as a revenue generation operation or opportunity for the town to recoup some of the long-term costs of building this facility, rather than here's another freebie at all cost to the town.
Currently, the cook shack is just a booking. Like the gazebo, we don't charge for groups that use the cook shack. It's very limited to what that can offer. There would be that opportunity. It's not something that we planned in. And certainly, I wouldn't lead anyone to believe that we could pay for this building off the rentals of the concession. currently out in Rotary Athletic Park, it was part of the development of the user groups and the donation pieces that wouldn't be a charge for the primary users out there. Again, it's not developed because it's just a space right now. It doesn't have the sink or anything like that in it. But yes, there would be that potential to charge a fee to book and use the concession space at Centennial Park.
Mental, and then we'll go to Council Ryan.
Thanks. So would the administration, and maybe this is a question for the CAO, would administration be open to a private entity coming by and saying, we'd like to rent this facility from the first day of summer to the last day of summer in conjunction with the splash park to maintain a private business operating out of that as a concession to generate revenue for the town? Because I grew up in a bigger city than Olds, and we had concession stands all over our recreational facilities operated by the town as a revenue generating event. We don't have that in Olds because we give that to minor hockey at the arena and whatnot. But I don't see a reason why we can't do that here and in fact encourage a private entity to come by and open up a private business in there to operate a concession, especially during the summer. While we have so many users at that splash park, I mean, let's be honest, on some days there's a crap ton more people at that splash park than there are at the aquatic center. So it seems to me that it's a revenue generating opportunity. I just want to know if the town would be interested in pursuing that type of revenue generation for this facility rather than, again, just saying carte blanche, go ahead and use it for free and the town will absorb all the costs of operating the facility.
Yeah, William.
Short answer, absolutely, we would be open to that. I think it's high time to think outside the box. Whether we generate a lot of revenue or we're just providing a service at no cost to the town for residents of Centennial Park, user groups, I think would be an excellent thing to investigate.
For those comments, we'll go to Councillor Ryan and then Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just one final comment I want to make, and that is I understand about the building being old, and I understand that the need to replace will be in the future, but I don't think it's something that we could afford to do right now. Again, I'm saying that we're $200,000 over. We need to cut something, and we haven't done anything yet to cut anything out of the capital, and she is shaking her head yes. So something has to give, and this is an area where we've already addressed with porta potties. We can address with putting a heater in, even though it's a temporary fix. It's only $11,000 compared to $350,000. So I'd be even if it's temporary and can last for another year or two, and then expand, create a situation where this can come back in the future. I like the idea about having a concession that could be, a business that operates it from in the summertime to generate some revenue for the town. So there's some opportunity there to explore further. And that's just my comments.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Deputy Mayor Blatz and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And my final comment here as well. I mean, I concur. I mean, maybe it isn't a need that we have at this point in time. Just a couple of points I want to clarify. First of all, many of I agree, stepping outside the box would be a wonderful idea, but many of our user groups are such people as the Kiwanis or the Rotary Park or the Lions Group, who typically any money they raise is fundraising they give back to the town or our community groups already, and I want to remind everyone of that as far as a concession goes. And thirdly, I think through you, Mayor Dahl, to Director Greco, when we look at putting in, per se, a heater in the Centennial Park facility, I think we need to look at what kind of long-term effects that might have, and will we have freezing pipes and such too, because I think that's more detrimental to our facility than not. So I think I would like more information coming back to council and more investigation on those options.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a quick question probably for Director Lindeman here. This budget line for the Centennial Park washrooms is allocated through the MSI. So there's no tax implication or funding from that aspect. It's this grant that we get from the provincial government. Of course, if we say no to this project, that MSI money still needs to be spent somewhere else.
It can carry forward,
Okay.
yes. So it does not need to be spent.
Okay,
this
so
year.
a supplemental there, Mayor.
Thank you, go ahead.
So thanks. So because it's grant funding through the MSI, we do it today, or we carry forward $350,000 to next year for another capital project. And because it's a grant funding, I see no reason to defer it, because it's not a tax implication or tax dollars being spent on this project. So either reallocate it. I would never recommend carrying it forward or moving it back. You know, either can we spend this $350,000 then on more sewer relining or stuff like that? Or take a project that we have currently being funded by tax revenue to MSI or something like that, because if we're going to defer it, then build it.
Thank you. Go to Director of Finance, Linderman first, and then Councillor Ryan.
The one thing I would like to caution council on is the fact that our MSI has decreased significantly year over year. So we used to get around the $2 million range, more than that even, and now we're down to 1 million that we get, right? So in 2024, we're going to have 1 million, which our MIP program uses already, like more than that. So you would have no MSI to use in any other project. So I'm a big proponent of carrying forward if we can right now, given that it's been reduced so significantly.
Thank you for sharing that. It's very important information. Councillor Ryan?
Yes, thank you, Director Lindeman, for that. And also, it's not 350,000 you're carrying forward. We're already at a $200,000 shortfall. So you're already carrying forward 150,000. Council's done this in the past. I think it's a good idea to carry forward because for that exact reason is we have absolutely no idea what MSI is going to do and what this new framework that the province is working out is going to do for us in the future. And it's always good to have that extra money to hold on to for the future. And it may be that we may not be able to do something like this for a couple of years.
Thank you for that. What I am observing and hearing around this table is that I'm getting the feeling myself that we're really not sure how we want to move this forward with what we want to do. And really, have we really talked to our citizens about what we are planning to do in this area? So I would like to see it carried forward personally myself, but I'd like to go around the table for those who haven't spoken to get a comment. Councillor Walsh?
I have no problem carrying it forward, but given that we'll be operating a ice rink there this winter, it might be worthwhile gathering data on the requirement that's moving forward, getting feedback from our citizens.
At the same time, the old concession that we used for years and years that they've pretty well closed now, it used to even keep people warm. And Kiwanis always brings their trailer in for this year, so this would be the year for us to gather information and do some real hard questions with our citizens. So, are there any further comments? All right, so I'm just going to ask for consensus to carry the MSI forward. Yay? Or sorry, just to carry forward. Yes. Yay?
Mayor, should we just not vote on, as we've done everything else, and say yes or no to the project?
Yes.
Allow administration to decide what to do with
All
the money.
right, let's just do that then. I'd ask for consensus then, yay. Or, sorry, nay. Yes or no? No, this is no. Okay, it's a no. It's a no. Thank you very much for your comments and information shared here. Network?
Okay, this initiative is to expand our, not necessarily expand, but continually maintain our trail network within the community as part of our active transportation and accessibility for our parks and amenities. The proposed trails for 2023 include the Highlands to Duncan link, the Imperial to 57th Ave link, and the Winter Drive to the Tree Reserve. So this initiative would provide those connective links and new pathway for the community. I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. So having listened to and agreed with all of the arguments about the washrooms built in Centennial Park, I'm seeing a lot of similarities in the argument that could be presented for not building these trails. Yes, people are saying they want more trails. A lot of people are saying they don't want trails. And to my opinion, more people are saying they're happy with the trail system. They'd rather see money spent on roads than on trails at the moment. We are seeing a lot of financial constraints. That's what we talked about here just a moment ago with the washrooms. And that these are like to haves. These are the glamorous projects, the luxury items that towns build to attract citizens. And I understand that concept. At the same time, potholes keep citizens happy, potholes keep citizens angry. And fixing of roads and the infrastructure problems we have are much more important at this stage of the game than continuously building these luxury items. So I don't support the expansion of trails at this time. I know that we have a master plan to build buckets of trails and keep everybody happy that likes to walk. But the fiscal responsibility right now in this high inflationary period where we're finding it difficult, we saw several examples of the 2022 budget where we budgeted for these projects that just simply became too expensive to do because of the inflation, and we weren't able to do them the way we wanted to do them. We saw that even in the Trails program in 2022. So I think we do need to put a little bit of a hiatus, a little bit of a break on these luxury items until we can get more of our core infrastructure fixed and repaired, and then we can revisit our luxury items like the trail system.
Councillor Wilson and then Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a couple of brief comments and similar to those of Councillor Cummings. There's a couple things that come forward for me, and one is we already have a fairly extensive trail network in town. I think it's 20 kilometers or 20 plus kilometers. So it's not like we don't have a trail network system. I'm very mindful of Director Greiko's comments 40 minutes ago where we talked about pinch points and pressures and shrinkage happening, and basically our dollar, at least as far as these capital projects, doesn't go anywhere near as far as it used to, and will likely even continue to shrink. And my final comment is, a couple of weeks ago I made the comment relative to the differentiation between the bling and the glitz and the glamour and the core, the meat and the potatoes, the basics. And to me, this is an example of what I would consider, call it whatever you want, a luxury item, a bling. It's nice to have, but I think we have other priorities to be focusing on as far as our core infrastructure, again, whether that's roads, whether that's below the road. So I can't support the trail network system at this time.
Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And just a comment that I have listening to my colleagues here. I do agree that this maybe is not something we need to look at now, but perhaps without it burdening any of our administration, the linkage to Rotary Park could be looked at for this season, being maybe a budget adjustment come spring, and engage our residents in the Winter Drive area and the Duncan Place area to find out the necessity of having linkage with those trail systems at this point in time and bring it back at another budget discussion. But at this time, it's probably not a necessity, just something I think we need to further investigate, because I know I've had many residents who've commented on the linkage from Imperial to the Rotary Park. So maybe that is something we could look at in the spring. But at this time, no, I don't support doing the trail systems.
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Ryan, but I do have a comment as well. And then I'll go to Director Wagstaff. He had a comment. What I've heard here is that some people like to walk. I'd like to say the verses and the opposite side of that is some people have to walk. They have no option. They can't afford to drive. They have to walk. And yet the comment with have taken a long break on the trails. I'm saying 8 years plus, a very long break we've taken. We also have new development, and we do need those connections on the trails. I agree that for 2022, for 23, I would have to say this would be my last time of waiving this for another year, because this has been an extraordinary long break. Now, who is next? Councillor Ryan and then Director Wagstaff.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I'm not sure it's been 8 years, but regardless, I think I agree with Councillor Blatz and the fact that the link to Rotary Park might be one of those ones where we do want to do it because we've created that fabulous facility and we want to make sure that people can get to it. So maybe changes from 150 down to 50. I have no idea what that link would cost. But again, we can bring that to spring adjustment if need be. But I do agree with Councillor Cummings and Councillor Wilson, Councillor Blatz, with regards to the fact that this is one of those things where it's nice to have. Is it necessary? Is it a needed thing? Probably not. I think we do have several infrastructure problems within the community, and that needs to be our priority at this point. I know that people like to walk, but again, Councillor Wilson has already pointed out that there's many kilometers of trails within the community and many sidewalks that we also maintain. Talking about maintaining, we haven't talked about what it would cost to maintain these extra links as well, so that's an added cost that's probably not in this $150,000 projection. So I would vote to defer.
Director Wagstaff, do you still wish to speak?
Yes, and I know Director Geico is just trying to pull up right now the breakdown for each of these. Listening to the conversation, I'd like to add some perspective around A, B, and C when you're talking about needs, wants. Letter C, Winter Drive to the Tree Reserve, to let you know that if you haven't walked that link, it is nearing a condition that we will have to close that short little link or rip it up and turn it into just gravel. It is in that kind of condition. That's a link I would say is on the need to look at. It is an existing trail that needs replaced. The other two are, do you want to add a link for convenience and growth? Between those two, I would suggest that Highlands to the Duncan link is probably one that, if is deferred, is seriously considered in the near future. Our trail system kind of ends, and it's also a link without walking across roads to the school in Holy Trinity in Highlands. So that part of the link is a more crucial gap, and it's been raised for a number of years in the community consultations. I think we did a parks consultation in 2017 where that was highlighted specifically. And then I just want to speak to the comments that were made about from Imperial over to Rotary Athletic Park. Until the developer develops that piece of land, it's actually not something that we have access to do any permanent linkage of a trail. We did look into that in 2019. As we were building the Rotary Athletic Park, we'd have to circle back, but the owner, the developer of that parcel was willing to have us do a temporary pathway through there that would be mulch, so that it could still be utilized for its agricultural purposes in the meantime until it's developed further. So that was an interim solution that we could explore further, but that a permanent link cannot occur until the developer develops that area.
Director Linderman and then Councillor Ryan.
I just have the breakdowns of the A, B, and C. So the Highlands to Duncan link is a $59,000. Imperial to 57th Avenue is $81,250, and the Winter Drive to the Tree Reserve is $10,000. That arguably is an operating expense because it is just repairing a current trail. Very small, I think it was 30 meters that needed to be done, so that could possibly be done within our repairs, roads and sidewalks budget.
Councillor Ryan, then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and thank you, Director Wagstaff, and to Director Lindeman with the breakdown. It would be good to have that information already put into our documents, so we would have known what those links were and what the situations were, rather than us guessing. I thought that was a the Imperial was a link to the Rotary Club. Obviously, it's not. And it would be good to know that Winter Drive is a hazard. So I think, if anything, we need to do that and fix that, or to do a replacement in that area, whatever that needs to be done, so that it's no longer a safety hazard for our residents who are using that. I think that's your number one priority. Why it was number C on this list, I have no idea. But if that's a priority, Director Wagstaff, then that should be pointed out to us, I believe, and should be done. I would be more than happy to continue to have that in the budget, but the other two I would definitely put off.
Thank you. It does bring to light that there's some safety concerns there. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment. So I do appreciate Director Lindeman's solution to option C. It's $10,000. It's not a big dollar amount. It can be covered, I think, into the operational budget. We can get those needed repairs done, because it is repairs. And I'm also a big fan, I've talked about before, of taking the concrete out and making it gravel. It just reduces the overall costs in moving forward. But the big comment I wanted to talk about here really is the differentiation between recreation and transportation. Getting to a place, that's why we have sidewalks. And we have sidewalks in all of our communities. So getting from point A, your house, to your school, you take the sidewalks. That's what transportation is. Recreation is a trail system. And I think there's some confusion there that the trail system is a transportation system. It certainly can be used as a transportation system, but it's not our fundamental transportation system. We've got the roads for vehicles, and we have sidewalks for people walking that are going from place A to place B. People who choose to use a recreational path as a transportation path are choosing that for convenience or for whatever reason. So in my mind, we have a transportation system set up to get people from point A to point B. And when we're talking about the priority that this council has set, we have talked in the past and in our processes that core infrastructure is more important at the moment than some of these wants of a trail system. And I've talked in the past as well that if we build things, we have to maintain those things. And so yes, option C, the damage to a trail system has to be addressed and fixed. But the expansion of a recreational path system is a want, not a need. And at this point in the game, we have to focus more on those needs than on the wants for the community.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I'm not going to argue this point any further. I disagree somewhat with Councillor Cummings, though. And again, I will go back to the fact that this could come back to us in the spring as an adjustment. Again, I think we need to speak to the residents in the Highlands and Duncans and find out if that is main arterial route, to the schools. I know if I was a parent, I don't know that I'd want my kids walking from Davis Place all the way around to Holy Trinity, per se. So I would, again, I understand the necessity for what's imperative to get fixed, but I would like to see this come back perhaps as a spring adjustment and a little bit more investigation done with those local residents to find out the utilization of that trail system.
I agree, it should come back for spring adjustment as well, but I would argue that we don't have a lot of sidewalks in walkable areas in this town, and we're still working on trying to get them in. So there are people that still route to trails, but I'm not arguing that either. So, Councillor Wall?
Actually, I'm just curious, this 150, would that be contracted out, or is that an internal job?
That would be an external contractor with respect to the links.
Okay. Supplemental. I just, listening to this and hearing that contractors aren't willing to bid on small contracts, I'm thinking we probably need a 3-year cycle to build up enough volume to attract these big contractors. Trying to do this on an annual basis on these small jobs, especially on the infrastructure work, I think council needs to look at it as every 3 years we go out to bid for some of these repairs and have a big enough job that people will bid on them.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. C.O. Williams?
Thanks, Mayor Dahl. And I would have to echo and agree with Councillor Walsh and remind Council that we do have a grant for a connected community study. A trail network will be part of that, starting almost right away. So in the spring, Council will have that report, essentially. And in the interest of moving this along, I think we can just agree that we can arrive back in the spring with another discussion.
Very good. So I guess do you want us to take a consensus? Okay, I think we've got the answer, but yay? No? Thank you.
All right, moving on to sports fields. Our last item is the scoreboards at Rotary Athletic Park, and Director Greco.
Yep, thank you. And I'll probably share this initiative with Director Wagstaff. With respect to this initiative, it's for new scoreboards at the Rotary Diamond facility. The scoreboard, the total estimated cost is $135,000 for the scoreboards. $75,000 of that initiative is going to be raised by the funds of Olds Minor Baseball. The remaining 60 would be allocated towards the foundation, the mounting, and the electrical installation of the scoreboards. There's a total of 4 that we would put in. That would be within the scope of the project. We would be putting the project essentially would be done by a third party, wouldn't be done by town staff. It'd be done in conjunction with a engineering consultant. And then I'll possibly turn it over to Director Wagstaff if he wants to expand.
Just a bit of a comment on a bit of history to the athletic park. Scoreboards were not included in the original engagement process that we went through with the community and the stakeholders when we brought forward what the priorities were going to be used for in the fundraised dollars that was going to enhance the park beyond the basic park. At that point, the feedback was of the dollars that we had allocated that could be used to enhance the park, other items like the washroom, the batting cage, dugouts were prioritized, and playground were the priorities at that time. What has transpired since the short time of it being opened is Minor Ball has come back and indicated that they do have sponsors for the scoreboard purchase of $75,000, and they approached the town asking that if they did that, would the town consider the installation costs.
Okay, we've got Councillor Wilson, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a question or two. I'm just trying to envision this without getting into detail, but is this a manual scoreboard? Is this an electronic scoreboard? Is this going to be like Fenway Park, where we have somebody sitting behind on the Green Monster? Yeah, sitting behind, manually changing and updating scores.
This is an electronic score clock. You know, similar in nature to what we would have in the Sportsplex, where you have the lights.
Supplemental, please, and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Yes, and thanks for that clarification. And the 75,000, that's capped out by Olds Minor Baseball, or is there opportunity? Do they know? Did they say that they can go more than that, or they committed to 75 and that was it?
They committed to the purchase of the score clocks themselves, and then approached, and we committed to bringing it to council on the installation costs.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I guess I have some concern. And the thing is that it's all nice to bring these things in and hang them up. But who's operating them? Who's maintaining them? Who's paying if there's damage to them or breakdowns, or who's replacing them? So what, you get them up in the air, and then then you've got all these other things that are up in the air. So I would like to see a little bit more information provided to us with regards to those aspects.
Mr. Lindeman?
In my opinion, they become our assets. They are just sponsoring the scorecard, or score clocks, and so they are ours, and we would maintain them. If they break down, it is us that needs to replace them. They are our assets.
Honorable assets. Deputy Mayor Blatz and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dahlin, through you to Director Linderman or perhaps Director Wagstaff. So if they become our asset, then will we have any oversight in what will be purchased, or this is already a predetermined sign? And do we know that we can maintain and will have the, the ability to do so? It's not going to end up costing us $1 million down the line. Pardon me, that's exaggeration. But, it's not going to cost us a whole bunch of money because, A, we can't either get parts or they've got to come from, somewhere else far, far away. So I just want to ensure that we do have a little bit of oversight in the purchase of this sign.
We did indicate to them that we would have oversight in the RFP to actually where the clock was purchased, and then collaborative input into the type of clock once it comes down to the particular clock being ordered. Yes, you have rightly identified the risks that attain whenever we assume a sponsorship donation to our parks, whether it be a playground item or whether it be something electronic like a clock. They are our asset, and then we assume the liability of maintaining that asset for its lifetime.
You, Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have to apologize. I only have the old capital investment information sheet that doesn't actually have an impact on operating budget comment filled out. So I'm not sure if the new one does or not. And this is a concern I've raised multiple times. I'll continue to raise every time a capital project comes up here. It's all fine and dandy that we're going to get money up front from some other organization to help pay for something. But I can't approve or say yay to any project unless I know how much it's going to cost every single year moving forward, or at least some sort of estimate on how much that's going to cost. We're talking 4 scoreboards. I think that's what was mentioned here. That's 4 control systems. That's 4 communication systems. However they're updating these signs. That's 4 sets of light bulbs. There is an operational impact there every single year in our parks program. I think we've had this conversation twice already today that there are needs and there are wants. It would be awesome to be able to have scoreboards of digital, whatever, the coolest things out there that can have advertising on it and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure Minor Ball is super happy and excited to be able to have that sort of stuff. But without a better analysis on how much it's going to cost every single year, I can't say yes to this. And like I said, it's great that we've got this $75,000 coming from Minor Ball, but we have to stop saying yes to capital projects because people are funding it without a realization and a rationale on who's going to cover the operational costs moving forward. And until I get that information, I'm going to say no to this one.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And yes, I feel the same way. My concern is getting these things, and they'll cost us a huge amount of money down the road. The electronics within them are old. 5 years from now, they could be totally antiquated. You might not be able to get parts. So then who's going to pay for all of that? You say it's going to be our asset, then it's going to be on the town to pay for it. Unless we write a contract that says if these are, they break down and cannot be repaired, then they're not going to be repaired. I mean, I just think we have to be cognizant about accepting these kinds of ideas, which are great, but there's consequences to taking them and risks and costs to the town going forward. I'm very concerned, and I would rather see something more wholesome come to us and say, this is going to be X amount of dollars to maintain them, and this is what could be our potential cost going going down the road. It could cost us another $60,000 a year. We don't know that.
You, Councillor Ryan. CEO Williams and then Deputy Mayor Blatz.
So in the updated project paper, there is a couple comments on operating costs. We're estimating $500 per year per scoreboard. That follows the 3% investment of the capital cost, which, installation aside, is the $75,000 purchase price for each of the 4 scoreboards. $500 is obviously an estimate. Vandalism and whatnot will drive that up. We don't feel it's going to add anything significant to our operating budget in terms of staff time, the kind of harder to calculate items. And then with regards to depreciation of the asset, 15 years, vandalism aside, is what it's estimated at. So you take essentially 135, divide that by the estimated depreciated lifespan, and that's, along with the maintenance side, at $500 per year per scoreboard is what you can estimate it at. So if you don't like the project, that is just one thing to say. If you just want more information, the budget's not being approved today. Just ask us to bring it back. So, I mean, it's just an easier conversation than we're having right now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Blatz and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and actually CEO Williams just made my comment. I was just going to say we can have more information come back December 12th and have many of these answers or these questions answered, because this is something that we've got a community group willing to do for us. I think we need to seriously look at it, but we also obviously need to be have all the questions answered as well.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Sure, I'm content to wait it out. But I will say, I am concerned with the total cost of ownership. I'm concerned with the service level agreement. You're going to put these boards up. Sponsors are perhaps going to have their names displayed. They're going to have expectations. Nobody wants to be associated with a malfunctioning piece of equipment. We do have a designated resource person out there already to maintain the fields. So total cost of ownership is definitely a concern of mine. The secluded area and subject to vandalism and or perhaps repeated vandalism. So I will patiently wait for more information, but at this point, I don't support the project.
Thank you. I've heard from everyone. Would you like to make a comment, Councillor Walsh? I know you always say that. Unfortunately, speaking is better. Okay, so that's what we're hearing. We're hearing Councillor Cummings.
Thanks, and thank you to the CAO for having that information. Like I said, I, for some reason, can't find the new ones. The formula you presented there, I understand is a base formula that helps us make these estimates. Is there, because we're asking for more information to come back, can we get maybe reach out to some other communities that have this type of scoreboard set up in their facilities and see what their actual historical costs of repair are? Because I know that vandalism by yourself as well has been mentioned quite a bit here. We know that there's a serious issue of vandalism at Rotary Athletic Park right now. That's most likely not going to disappear anytime soon. So that's a concern I have, and I don't know how that's playing out in other sports fields and other communities with signs similar to ours. It's not abnormal to have signs like this, and I wish we could get to a point where we can afford to do that. And I'm not saying yes or no to the project, and I like the idea of the project. I just wanted a little bit more information on the realistic costs moving forward. So rather than just use the estimation formula that accountants love, it's more of, can we get some realistic idea of how these costs are being seen in other communities when it comes back? That's just a specific request on that information that's coming back.
So what I've heard around the table then is that we're asking administration to bring this back to us. Did you have a final comment, Councillor Ryan?
I do, thank you, Mayor Dahl, and that is, I don't even know if we have people on staff who even have the ability to maintain them either. So I think we need to get more information, and thank you to the CEO for suggesting that we provide more information to us at the December 12th meeting, but I won't be at that one. But, I want to make sure that we know what we're getting into.
Thank you. So administration's heard what we said to bring this item back. Very good. And that brings us to the end. So Before we adjourn, I would please ask if I could get a motion to accept for information the 2023 operating and capital budgets as presented. Deputy Mayor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move the council accepts for information the 2023 operating and capital budgets as presented.
Thank you. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And I would ask for adjournment, please, for 12:03 p.m. Councillor Walsh?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, administration, for your time for us. Thank you to the viewers.